You only start one of these companies if you believe in giving people a voice.
Social media, originally built as a way to connect people.
The whole point of social media is basically...
and allow the free flow of ideas.
Giving people the ability to share what they want.
Has evolved into a complex ecosystem that now serves as the backbone of global communication.
And, it goes back to, our original mission is just give people the power to share and make the world more open and connected.
In its early days, platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram were largely focused on the idea of giving everyone a voice.
I wasn't too deep on our content policies for the first 10 years of the company.
A platform to share their opinions and the ability to engage in open dialogue.
It was just kind of well known across the company. We were trying to give people the ability to share as much as possible.
But with this newfound freedom came a host of challenges that these companies weren't fully prepared to handle.
Issues would come up, practical issues, right? So if someone's getting bullied, for example, we deal with that, or we put in place systems to fight bullying.
Right. Bullying, misinformation, and copyright infringement were the first big issues to emerge.
Someone's pirating copyrighted content on the service. It's okay, we'll build controls to make it so we'll find IP-protected content.
These were relatively straightforward in the beginning. Policies were created to remove harmful content.
But it was really, in the last 10 years, people started pushing for ideological based censorship.
Shut down copyright violators and protect users from harassment.
And I think it was two main events that really triggered this.
However, as social media platforms expanded and their influence grew, so did the complexity of managing these issues. One of the most significant shifts occurred after the 2016 U.S. presidential election.
In 2016, there was the election of President Trump.
Social media was now seen not only as a platform for conversation.
Also coincided with basically Brexit in the EU and sort of the fragmentation of the EU.
But as a potential weapon for disinformation and political manipulation.
And then, in 2020, there was COVID. And I think that those were basically these two events where, for the first time...
This period marked the beginning of ideological censorship.
We just faced this massive, massive institutional pressure.
With platforms scrambling to build tools to combat fake news and foreign interference.
To basically start censoring content on ideological grounds.
In response, companies like Facebook and Twitter introduced fact-checking systems.
So I took this and just kind of assumed that everyone was acting in good faith.
Algorithms designed to detect and flag false or misleading information.
There are concerns about misinformation, just like when people raised other concerns in the past and we tried to deal with them.
However, these systems weren't perfect, and their implementation sparked fierce debate.
If you ask people, no one says that they want misinformation, so maybe there's something that we should do to basically try to address this.
Were these platforms going too far in suppressing information or not far enough?
So we tried to put in place a system that would deal with it. And early on tried to basically make it so that it was really limited. We're like, all right, we're just going to have this system where there's these third-party fact checkers and they can...
As the lines between content moderation and censorship blurred, these companies were accused of bias, of favoring certain ideologies while silencing others.
Check the worst of the worst stuff, right? So things that are very clear hoaxes, that there's it's not like we're not parsing speech about whether something is slightly true or slightly false.
The once free-flowing exchange of ideas was now being filtered.
We put in place the system and it just sort of veered from there.
Raising concerns over the neutrality and accountability of tech giants.
It's because some of the people whose job is to do fact-checking, a lot of their industry is focused on political fact-checking, so they just kind of veered in that direction.
This ideological battleground also led to the complex relationship between social media platforms and governments worldwide.
We had originally intended was just judge people's opinions to kind of help fact-check some of the stuff that seems the most extreme.
In many cases, governments have stepped in, accusing platforms of censorship and even threatening regulatory action.
It was just never accepted by people broadly. I think people just felt like the fact-checkers were too biased.
Mm-hmm. On the other hand, these very platforms have been pressured to remove harmful content.
Although sometimes I think people would disagree with that, a lot of the time it was just what types of things they chose to even go and fact-check in the first place. So
whether it be hate speech, terrorist propaganda, or misinformation about health and elections.
It just became very difficult to kind of follow. And this really hit the most extreme, I'd say, during the Biden administration when they were trying to roll out the vaccine program.
The resulting situation is a tangled web of free speech, corporate responsibility, and government regulation.
While they're trying to push that program, they also tried to censor anyone who is basically arguing against it. And they pushed us super hard.
Finding the balance between free expression and content moderation has proven to be one of the greatest challenges these companies face.
To take down things that were true, right? I mean, they basically pushed us and said, anything that says that vaccines might have side effects, you basically need to take down. I was just like, well, we're not going to do that.
Social media platforms are now at the center of a global debate on transparency, accountability, and how to manage the vast amount of content that flows through them every day.
Inarguably true.
Who is they? Who's telling you to take down, talk about vaccine side effects?
It was people in the Biden administration.
The challenge lies in creating systems that can both protect users from harmful content.
Jim Jordan in the House had this whole investigation and committee into the kind of government censorship around stuff like this. And we produced all these documents and it's all in the public domain. I mean,
while ensuring that public discourse remains vibrant and open.
These people from the Biden administration call up our team and scream at them and curse. And it's like these documents it's all kind of out there.
One effort in this direction is Twitter's Community Notes feature.
What Twitter and X have done with Community Notes, I think it's just a better program.
Which allows users to add context to tweets that may lack critical information or be misleading.
When you're talking about nation states or people interfering, a lot of that stuff kind of accounts doing phony things.
This feature relies on the collaboration of users to fact check in real time.
China or Russia or Iran or one of these countries, they'll set up these networks of fake accounts and bots.
Theoretically making the platform more accurate and reliable.
They coordinate and they post on each other's stuff to make it seem like it's authentic.
But even this solution raises questions about impartiality.
Kind of convince people it's wow, a bunch of people must think this or something.
Who decides what information is necessary context?
The way that you identify that is you build AI systems that can basically detect that those accounts are not behaving the way that a human would.
And how do we ensure that biases don't seep into this user-driven system?
How do you differentiate? How do you figure that out?
But we have a team of it's effectively intelligence, counterintelligence folks, counterterrorism folks, AI folks who are building systems to identify that are just not behaving the way that people would, and how are they interacting, and then
the threat of coordinated manipulation also looms large.
And sometimes you get some tips from different intelligence agencies, and then you can kind of piece together over time. It's this network of people is actually some kind of fake cluster of accounts, and that's against our policies, and we just take them all off.
How are you sure? Is there a 100% certainty?
Networks of bots and fake accounts have been used to amplify specific narratives or spread disinformation.
I think for the specific problem around these large coordinated groups doing election interference or something, it's a large enough group. We have a bunch of people analyzing it. It's they study it for a while. I think we're probably pretty accurate on that.
Disrupting meaningful conversations and creating confusion.
Changing the content filters to have to require higher confidence and precision is actually going to be the thing that reduces the vast majority of the censorship mistakes that we make.
In response, platforms are deploying artificial intelligence.
Removing the fact checkers and replacing them with community notes, I think it's a good step forward. But let's say you say, no, we really need to find everyone who's doing this bad thing.
AI and cybersecurity experts to identify and remove these malicious actors.
It could be any kind of content of any kind of category of harmful content. But the problem is, if you're at 90% precision, that means 1 out of 10 things that the classifier takes down is not actually problematic.
But AI is far from perfect.
If you kind of multiply that across the billions of people who use our services every day, millions and millions of posts that are basically being taken down are innocent, and upon review, we're going to look at it and be like, this is ridiculous that this thing got taken down.
And even the most advanced algorithms struggle to differentiate between satire, genuine debate, and malicious intent.
But it really just comes down to this question of where do you want to set the classifiers? Governments running these broad manipulation campaigns. We're not letting off the gas on that at all. I think most categories of bad stuff that we're policing, everyone agrees is bad.
The question remains, can we ever truly eliminate this kind of manipulation, or will social media always be vulnerable to it?
People clearly believe that, election interference and foreign government manipulation of content is bad. So this is the type of stuff that the vast majority majority of our energy goes towards that, and we're not changing our approach on any of that.
Meanwhile, the way people consume information is also shifting.
I think that's basically, it needs to shift for the internet age.
More users are turning away from traditional media outlets.
I think a lot of the people looked to before, they're kind of realizing, hey, they weren't super honest about a lot of these issues that we face.
And placing their trust in independent content creators.
Social media isn't a monolithic thing. It's not that people trust Facebook or X. They trust the creators and the voices that
whose direct and unfiltered approach feels more authentic.
They feel like are being authentic and giving them valuable information on there. So
this transition is reshaping the way influence is measured in the digital age.
Who basically become the new kind of cultural elites that people look at. These are the people who give it to me straight.
And it's changing the power dynamics between established institutions and individual voices.
Maybe it's possible because of social media, also just the internet more broadly. I mean, I think podcasting is obviously a huge and important part of that too. But I think that this is like a very big sea change in terms of like who are the voices that matter.
Adding another layer to this complexity is the issue of anonymity.
Another argument for anonymous accounts. I think you should have anonymous accounts.
While anonymity on social media could be a powerful tool for free speech.
Something like COVID mandates or some things that you're dealing with and you don't want to get fired because of it, you should be able to talk about it.
Especially in countries with authoritarian regimes.
Mm-hmm. And you should be able to post facts and information and what you've learned, or anecdotal experiences of people in your family that had vaccine side effects, and not worry about losing your job.
It can also shield those who spread hate or misinformation.
Which people were worried about, which is so crazy. A lot of the people that used to be in mainstream media got fired, and now they're trying to do the sort of podcast thing.
Striking the right balance between protecting users' privacy and holding individuals accountable for what they say online is a challenge that no platform has fully solved.
It's not just the government. We just want different people who we actually trust,
right?
Who are actually going to tell us the truth.
In democratic countries like the U.S., censorship by the government is forbidden by law.
We try to build a platform that gives people a voice, but I think that there's this wholesale generational shift in who are the people who are being listened to. And I think that that's like a very fascinating thing that is going on.
But social media platforms, being private companies, operate in a gray area where they can still control what's seen and said.
Starting these jobs, they're coming out of universities, and in the universities, they're indoctrinated into these ideas as well. It's very difficult to be a person who stands outside of that and takes unpopular positions. You get socially ostracized, and they're very hesitant to do that, and they would rather just keep their mouth shut and talk about it in quiet conversation.
Enter Elon Musk. Musk's acquisition of Twitter has become one of the most high-profile moves in tech history.
What Elon did on the Twitter files when he took over that company.
With the release of the Twitter files, the inner workings of Twitter were laid bare.
I think Jim Jordan basically did that for the rest of the industry.
Exposing how policies around content moderation had been shaped behind the scenes.
With the congressional investigation that he did.
This transparency sparked new conversations about the responsibility and power of tech companies in shaping public discourse.
And we just turned over all of the documents and everything that we had to them, and they basically put together this report.
Adding to the growing scrutiny of these platforms is Jim Jordan's congressional investigation.
Jim Jordan and the House had this whole investigation and committee into the kind of government censorship around stuff like this. And we produced all these documents, and it's all in the public domain.
These inquiries have placed social media companies under the microscope.
And the people that actually did call for censorship, what was their response to all this?
Demanding clarity about how these corporations handle censorship and free speech.
I mean,
any repercussions?
They lost the election.
Yes, so that's it. That's it.
Well, in a democracy, that's
right.
kind of...
These investigations further fuel the debate over how much power tech companies should have when it comes to controlling the flow of information.
I was really worried from the beginning about basically becoming this sort of decider of what is true in the world. Right? That's kind of a crazy position to be in for billions of people using your service. And
the stakes couldn't be higher. Free speech remains a cornerstone of democracy, and social media platforms have become integral in upholding that principle.
It just got to a point where it's just, okay, this is destroying so much trust, especially in the United States, to have this program.
Dana White's leadership at UFC presents a unique counterpoint in this discussion.
I think Dana's going to be great.
He's the best.
Great entrepreneur.
I agree with everything you said about him. Without him, none of the UFC would have ever taken place the way it did.
White took a niche sport and transformed it into a global phenomenon.
I mean, you needed the Fertitta brothers. They had to come in with all the money and the vision. And
Proving that strong leadership and visionary entrepreneurship can overcome even the toughest challenges.
Ricky Rocket and him were at the UFC, and we were talking about it in the 90s. We're like, you know what the sport needs? The sport needs some billionaires who just throw a ton of money at it and just get it huge. And then the Fertitta brothers come along.
In White's world, there is no room for indecision.
Billionaires with a ton of money who are huge fans of the sport, just love the sport.
He had to take risks, be bold, and lead with conviction.
You know, we're hiring people like Frank Shamrock to come in and train them and work out. And we're taking jiu-jitsu with John Lewis, and they were really getting into it.
The comparison between the clarity of leadership in UFC
And so then they buy the UFC for like $2 million, which is probably the greatest purchase ever.
and the sometimes murky decision-making processes of tech giants like Facebook and Twitter is stark.
Except they were $40+ million in the hole when they financed the Ultimate Fighter. And then that was 2005. And then this one fight takes place with Stephen Botter and Forrest Griffin on television. It's so wild and so crazy that millions of people start tuning in. The sport's born.
At Meta, the company behind Facebook and Instagram,
I have the benefit of not having to convince the board not to fire me.
Mark Zuckerberg holds the majority of voting shares,
I'm not worried about losing my job because I control the majority of the voting in the company.
which gives him significant control over the company's direction.
So I actually get to use our board to like have the smartest people who I can get to have around me help work on these problems.
This allows him to focus on long-term innovation rather than being swayed by short-term corporate politics.
And then it's like, okay, I could spend all my time doing that, but I'm not even a politician. I just want to spend my time building things, right?
Right.
Surrounding himself with entrepreneurial minds like Dana White,
So it's like, all right, who are the people I want? I just want like the best entrepreneurs and people who've created different things.
Zuckerberg aims to tackle some of the world's toughest challenges.
We have a lot of governments and folks around the world putting a lot of pressure on our company, and like we need some like strong people who are going to basically, help advise us on how to handle some of these situations. And
Whether in tech or social media policy.
what Dana's done with the UFC is like one of the most legendary business stories. He's got a strong backbone. There's definitely a lot of pressure from like all these different governments, and I think Dana's going to be great.
Interestingly, Zuckerberg's passion for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu
You know what? We're also lucky that you got into jiu-jitsu. Because I think that had an effect on you. I saw your neck. I'm like, his neck's bigger. Your neck is bigger.
Good.
has had a profound impact on his leadership style.
It's really important to me for balance. I mean, I basically try to train every morning. I'm either doing general fitness or kind of MMA.
The discipline, strategy, and resilience he develops.
I wasn't integrated between my weight training and my fighting training, so I think I was probably overdoing it. So now we basically, I'm just trying to do this in a cohesive way, which I think will be more sustainable.
Through martial arts, mirror the skills required to navigate the challenges of running a global tech giant.
But when I tore my ACL, first of all, everyone at the company was like, we're going to get so many more emails now. It's like that he can't do this.
The influence of martial arts on Zuckerberg's ability to handle crises and think strategically speaks to the broader idea that leaders often draw strength from unexpected places.
But she was like, no. She's like, when you heal your ACL, you better go back to fighting. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, you are so much better to be around now that you're doing this. You have to fight.
The collaboration between figures like Zuckerberg and White exemplifies the power of diverse experiences in driving success.
Isn't it funny that that's completely contrary to the way most people, if they're outside of it, would perceive it?
I mean, it definitely takes the edge off things.
While tech companies face challenges in content moderation and free speech,
Right? It's like
100%.
after like a couple of hours of doing that in the morning, it's just like nothing else that day is going to stress you out that much, right? You can just deal with it.
entrepreneurial leaders like White show that vision, risk-taking, and strategic thinking can yield transformative results.
It's good. It's also good, I think, to be a little bit tired. Like it's I love that feeling of just like,
As social media continues to evolve, the need for innovative solutions and strong leadership remains more critical than ever. The convergence of tech innovation and leadership discipline could well shape the future of how we communicate and interact in the digital space.